Philanthropy is not a choice between helping one person at a time or helping the world. It's about coming together to do both in an equal fashion to have an impact. Many people in the industry have heard about Terraset and the great work they're doing. We talk a lot about non-dilutive capital, grants, and today's session, I'm really happy to be joined by Adam Fraser, the CEO of Terraset, and he's gonna go a little bit more into detail on the business, the space, and thinking through philanthropic capital. But maybe let's start off, Adam, very simply. Tell us about yourself, your company, what you do, and really an overarching lens around philanthropy in the space.
Thanks for the opportunity to be doing this. Terraset's a 501c3, a non-profit. I always like to mention a definition of 501c3 there because this is an international and a global problem, even though we're a US-based organization. We are focused on driving philanthropic capital into carbon removal. We generally do that via pre-purchases, so paying for carbon to be removed, and then that is delivered on a time scale. Might be 1 year, might be over several years. But the key thing is that we're doing that not just to pay for X number of tons of carbon to be removed from the atmosphere, but also to try and scale the sector, try and drive more capital into different carbon removal solutions to help bring the sector to scale.
And speaking of scale, so obviously we have a lot of scaling to do. When you look at projects, how are you allocating investment? What are some of the key criteria? Talk us through that, because again, in this space, it's burgeoning. Philanthropic elements are so vital. But from your lens, what does that look like?
Now, as a buyer of removals, we assess against a number of different criteria, which would be quite familiar to anyone who knows the space and who knows other buyers and assessors in the space. We're looking for removals that are scalable, validated, verifiable, ethical, a range of other criteria. One thing that I think it's not unique to us, but something that we're very, very conscious of, is also the criteria that those investments should be catalytic. We're moving millions of dollars to carbon removal. We want to move tens of millions of dollars or more. But this is a problem that is many hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars to solve. So that money is not going to flow via us. It's not going to flow via any one entity. We need to try and figure out how we can be most catalytic in unlocking more buyers, in helping to increase demand, in helping to increase supply, and really growing the sector as a whole. So that catalytic piece is something that really cuts through our thinking as well.
And I was talking to some policymakers this week on Capitol Hill. One of the stats I heard was about $700 billion in capital over the next 2 decades for like biomass waste to value type projects that embody circular economy. A lot of when I hear integrity, transparency, traceability, biochar certainly is one of the first things that comes to mind. What are some of the elements that you like about biochar versus the other, when you look at the portfolio and you look at other CDR types, how do you approach that? And how does biochar essentially suss out in comparison?
Yeah, I think to take a step back on the question, and at a philosophical level as Terraset, we believe that we need a lot of different solutions to come to market, and that we need lots of examples of those different solutions. So we need multiple direct air capture solutions, multiple solutions of every methodology or protocol. Biochar is obviously something that has huge potential in terms of the numbers you see reported, of the scale it can reach, which is into the gigatons, just as biochar. It's also something that comes at a lower cost than many other forms of CDR right now. Now, as Terraset, we are not making our purchase decisions right now based on cost, based on cost per ton of one technology versus another, because we're really thinking about the long term and the scalability. But as a sector, as a methodology, biochar is well positioned in being at the price point that it is, and hopefully as that price point continues to come down, which we want to see across all technologies, I think it's also really interesting. We care a lot about the co-benefits of any of the purchases we're making. Like those are interesting to us. And biochar, you know better than me, has some amazing co-benefits, whether that's increasing soil quality, whether it's when it's involved in construction, it's reducing the carbon footprint of certain construction techniques or products. And so I think both the ability to take carbon out of the air right now, the ability to scale and do that more efficiently at a cost that works as we try and bring that cost down across the sector, and those co-benefits all combined to make it just a very important piece of the puzzle.
It's all of the co-benefits. It's biodiversity. We talk a lot about the bioeconomy. And certainly we have a lot of work to do in this country and around the world in terms of just improving. Soil amendment is one of the biggest use cases for biochar. We're seeing other use cases in the value chain that will help us not only abate emissions in hard to abate sectors, but also provide a lot of economic opportunity in different communities. And I saw a statistic, I think a 4 megawatt pyrolysis machine produces up to $100 million in economic value over a 4 to 5 year period, depending on what the use case is. So there's a lot to like about the other elements. You talk about catalytic capital, very important, flexibility. How does philanthropic capital give potentially more flexibility when approaching investment opportunities, and what benefits do you see when it comes to biochar and of course the CDR portfolio as a whole, because you're looking at everything conceptually?
It's a great question. I think one area of flexibility it gives is unlocking more buyers, unlocking more people to be part of the space. So even before we get to the investment point, there are people who care about the amount of greenhouse gases in the air, who might not be looking to step into this space from an investment perspective, or who might not be looking to go and contract with an individual carbon removal company, but they do care about this. And providing a route for them to do that through philanthropic capital, not because they're trying to get a personal gain from it or anything like that, purely because they think this is a philanthropic investment. This is a way I can make the world a better place, as you referenced at the start of the conversation.
Yeah.
Gives different people and a different form of capital kind of a route into the carbon removal market. When we think of how we use our funds, I touched on one thing before, which is we don't need to think what's the exact number of tons or the target number of tons we are looking to remove, by the end of the year or at this point. We can think, what's the most impactful use of our funding? Now, it's still a difficult decision to get right, but what's the most impactful use of our funding for the long term? Where do we really can play a role in what the price per ton is in 10 years or 5 years, not just what it is today at the point we're paying? I think the other thing about flexibility is in timelines for delivery. There are examples in our portfolio of removals that are being delivered right now, and there are examples where that's staggered over many years to come. And that's true of anyone buying carbon right now, buying carbon removals right now. There's something we can be very comfortable in thinking like the end goal is the important thing to us, not just does this happen at this price point by this date, but what's the ultimate end goal?
And let's stick on that for a second, the end goal. So I have deep admiration, not just for Terraset, but for you as an individual, what you've done internationally, your work with Mandela Foundation. I spent a lot of time myself working across Middle East and Africa and doing early work on access to energy. There's a lot of talk in the industry about DMRV, measurement, reporting, verification, to protect the integrity of the carbon profile of the project and the offsetting. But there's also societal, environmental impact, the people in those communities. I always come back to people. The big three: people, planet, profit. People are at the root of this industry, and we have to enable them with the tools to be successful. How are you ensuring, both with your personal experience, of course, at Terraset, that these projects meet those impactful goals and requirements over the long term, not just measuring, of course, the carbon piece of the project?
Yeah, that's a big question. As you said, I worked for the Laureate Sport for Good Foundation, which was founded under the patronage of President Mandela, and that carries a certain legacy when you're doing it of how you want to approach work. a big part of that is listening to communities, listening to people, and making sure that you are giving solutions or having an impact that they actually want for their community. And I think that really translates across to carbon removal. It's really, I think, a positive thing to see how much community engagement, community feedback is starting to come through. You see it with the DOE's processes, you see it with other buyers, like people are really starting to emphasize it. But that can be done as an afterthought. You can design everything you want to do and then think, here's how we check in with the community. Or it can be a much more proactive process where the community is actually feeding into the things that will affect it. And that's at a local level, at a global level as a community. But there are all sorts of implications. We talked about co-benefits. There were all sorts of other potential implications of any technology, any change in a local ecosystem. And we really look for our projects to be consulting the community as part of that and demonstrating to us that they are taking those steps as part of we would call it the ethical piece as one of our criteria. But moving beyond that, being just reactive and being proactive.
And being proactive, that's certainly the ethos of what we're trying to do at Grain. And proactively, we found, get connected to yourself and the team at Terraset. We see incredible symbiosis and synergies in terms of how our businesses can work together to not just deploy the necessary capital, but ensure we're engaging in the communities to create these projects, scale these projects, and hopefully get the next generation involved. I mean, that's also really important. There are layers to this complexity. I'd love your perspective to maybe share for the group, talking a little bit more on how you envision partnership with Grain, how you see Grain helping to de-risk some of these opportunities and accelerate the pace with which catalytic and philanthropic capital can flow into the space, and maybe with a little bit of a lens to what you see over the next year post Climate Week and COP29, I believe we're at now, which is hard to imagine. It's going so fast.
What I like about Grain is kind of in the name, Grain ecosystem. And it is that it's an ecosystem. So I love the fact that you have the people doing the work on the ground, the suppliers, the projects that are implementing biochar, and the availability of information that they can share, the availability of information that you have on the platform as investors, as people come and look at it. But it's also the other side of that ecosystem, the investors, the buyers, the people who are a part of that. And as I said before, with Terraset, we're really looking to give people a different way to be part of this. So where we can work with that network and with others to unlock philanthropic capital from people who are interested in biochar as part of this overall carbon removal solution, and then where the expertise, experience, information that you have about those projects on the ground is readily available, is very, very powerful. We have a due diligence process, we have criteria, we have all of those things. But more information is always useful. We are not trying to build a huge scientific research team in-house. Even if we had the budget to do that, we don't think that would be the most efficient role we could play in the space. So really accessing the information, especially as you said before, the verified information that's out there is really critical to us in making sure that we are making the best use of the funds with which we're entrusted.
It's all about working together to think again, uncover blind spots, remove that false confidence. That's what these ecosystem partnerships are all about. And it's a real honor and pleasure to be engaging together in that capacity. And I'm looking forward to the next time we do this, sharing some of the projects and impactful work we've done together, both here in the US and other areas where you have a big emphasis on allocation of capital. Adam Fraser, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.